Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings. So, today we are on the Sempsters tale, and for those of you who don't know, which will be probably, of all two of you who are going to watch this and so on, a Sempster is actually a seamstress. And the interesting thing, of course, is that in her endnotes, because Margaret Frazer always has endnotes at the end of these books, and in those endnotes, the author's note at the end, she talks about research that she had to do for these books. Because the thing is that when you're writing a historical novel, if you're going to do it properly, because, of course, anybody can throw something together and say, women were wearing big dresses and men were wearing silly tights and everybody was speaking funny. Anybody can write that. But to do a historical novel properly, you have to do research. You have to do research into the period. You have to do research into how people dressed and what they ate and what they wore and all of these things, because anything can turn out to be turn out to be an anachronism. And on top of all of that, you always have the question of, if you are writing this in modern English, and I mean that both in terms of the linguistic standards of modern English being the language that started to appear in approximately the 1500s, as opposed to modern English as in talking like somebody does down the street from you today. Either or, the thing about writing in the period that this is set in, the 1400s, during the 1400s, they were still speaking what we call Middle English. And Middle English is not English, not yet. It's an immediate precursor to English, and if you squint really hard at Chaucer, if you squint really hard at Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, when you do that, you can sort of parse out what they're saying. But what they're saying is an unholy mixture of, some German and some Latin and, and some this and that, and there is no consistent spelling because the idea of consistent spelling is of relatively recent vintage. And so on and so forth. The point is, though, that that if you're writing a historical novel set when everybody is speaking Middle English, you then have to sort of walk the fine line between this word hadn't been invented yet, but on the other hand, we're writing this in modern English, and the modern English word for this is, just the direct one-to-one translation of that word, so it doesn't matter. But in the case of seamstress and sempster, interestingly enough, according to the endnotes, seamstress came into being in the 1600s, which was about when the concept of feminine endings for words became kind of entered a vogue in the language, and people began to really insist on using these distinctly feminine or masculine ending for words, meaning that at the time this book is set, the Sempster's Tale, Sempster was the word for a person who does a lot of professional sewing of clothes and banners and stitchery type work, and was effectively the concept of seamstress, but it was a unisex word. A Sempster could be male or female. And it was just describing a person who spent a lot of time doing sewing work. In particular, those who did it as a profession. And so it's an interesting sidebar at the beginning that Margaret Frazer goes into. This actually is also a book in which there is a certain amount of discussion of Jews, which, because the Sempster our titular Sempster is a woman who was married, and her husband before he died, because she's a widow now. Before he died, he had, when they first married in point of fact, he had wanted her to help him build his business. That he had effectively said, "You're an excellent seamstress, Sempster, and I want to make you a part of the business, that I will teach you how to do these sort of fancy banners and things, and they will be able to expand the business and, do better." And one of the things that he did was he did a certain piece of legal work that a woman would require a man to do for her, such as her husband, to get her declared a femme sole, that is, a woman who is able to work on her own. You have to keep in mind, of course, again, this is from that bleak earlier period in human history when women were considered the property of their fathers until they became the property of their husbands. And so a woman needed to have sort of a public official declaration that made it legal for her to run a business of this sort. For her to be something other than a maid or desperately remarry, or work in someone else's laundry. That what he had done was meant that she, when he died, she could have the business, she could run the business, and she could keep running the business without requiring a man to do it for her. And so this woman starts, at the start of the book, we discover that she is having an affair with a Jew, which is also interesting because the thing was that England had driven out their Jews. Jews got driven out of a lot of places, periodically, historically. One of those places was England, and in this period of the Middle Ages, the Jews had basically been functionally thrown out of England entirely. It was basically illegal to be a Jew in England. And so if there were any Jews in England, they were living very much in hiding. And so what we have happening here is that you have this woman who is having an affair with a Jew, with a married Jew, by the way. I don't have a particular problem with, this woman having an affair with a Jew. God knows I don't really, that's not the point. The point is he's cheating on his wife with her, which that's a little problematic. But she's having this affair with him, and, at the start of the book, she has tried to make some challah, which, for those who don't know, I don't know how many of you know or don't know, on the Jewish Sabbath day, that is what we call Shabbat, or if you're going to be speaking Ashkenazi Hebrew, Shabbos, which is Saturday, basically Saturday, starting Friday at sunset and ending Saturday at sunset. You have this eggy bread, which is one of the best breads ever in the history of ever, thank you very much, which is called challah, which is spelled Challah, and if you can't say the guttural, then please call it challah instead of challah, because that's just weird. Anyway, so she has made this braided egg bread because one of the things he had told her was that he misses very much when he's traveling and having to pretend to be a traveling Christian as opposed to being openly Jewish, which he cannot be. That one of the things he misses is Shabbat. That is, he misses his holy day of the week. This is like a Christian missing their Sundays, that he misses having the evening prayer, the moment of lighting the candles for Shabbat, of all of the things that go into this moment every single week. And So in spite of the fact that she is Christian and his Judaism is illegal where they are and all of this stuff, she has gone to the effort to set up some sort of Shabbat for him. And of course, he is very appreciative. The thing is, as this story goes on, we get an appearance of a member of the Inquisition, because the church, we've all heard of the Spanish Inquisition, and of course nobody expects it, but the fact is that the church had, in point of fact, created a couple of different groups of monks, friars. In this particular case, I believe he's a Pauline, and they were created by the church for the purpose of hunting heretics. And in spite of the fact that Jews are not heretics, because to be a heretic, you have to have first been a good Christian and then come to believe things that are wrong within the context of the Christian church, the Catholic Church. And Jews who never believed in Christianity to begin with can't be heretics. And on top of that, the popes have apparently for centuries said everybody leave the Jews alone, and everybody ignored them because, I mean, why would you listen to a papal bull? He's only considered to be, like, religiously speaking, infallible. Like, there's the doctrine of papal infallibility, and, like, sometimes I don't understand people. But anyway, so this particular guy has decided that, Jews are heretics, even though they're not by the definition of heretic, and that the Pope doesn't count, even though the Pope totally should. And, when they find out that somebody has been murdered and had supposedly Hebrew symbols carved into him, which, like, this one guy who has a Jewish grandfather and no other Jewish family members, which, you know, means that he's not Jewish anyways, but also is a Christian priest. But he had a Jewish grandfather, so he'd seen Hebrew before, and he says those aren't Hebrew letters. That's just somebody, you know, carving random stuff designed to look like Hebrew letters, but it isn't. But they're accusing Jews of committing ritual murders for the purposes of bleeding people because they drink their blood at Passover ceremonies or something. I mean, I can figure out how that particular rumor would have started, but it's kind of, you know, bad. Anyway, so the Pauline friar goes out of his way and loses it, and when he happens to find out that our Sempsters paramour David is in fact a Jew, he decides that clearly that's the guy who must have murdered the poor young man who got murdered at the start of the book. And Dame Frevisse gets caught up all in the middle of this, much to her dismay. And all because her cousin Alice wants her to illegally collect money that has been illegally brought across the border into the country. Like, this whole book is just one long travail for Frevisse of everybody around me is wrong, and I can't do anything about this except just write it out. She is so aggravated throughout this whole book with her cousin who's making Frevisse do illegal things, with these various merchants who are aiding and abetting doing the illegal things, with this friar who is violating various, you know, church papal bulls because he is so determined to find himself a Jew to murder, and, like, the Jew who is way too caught up in being clever, and the Sempster who is having an affair with this Jew, and Frevisse is not really... She's fine with the fact that they're in love with each other. She has a problem with them having an illegal affair, which, I mean, you know, again, yes. And, like, and the whole thing ends with a denouement of, let's make Frevisse lie because she doesn't have any other options again. So, this is a heck of a ride, this book, with a lot of ongoing irritation on Frevisse's part. So that's my 15 minutes, and I will see you all next week.